Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Robin Budish. I'm the Executive Director of Transit Choices, and we are delighted to have you join us this morning. We would like to introduce our first guest speaker, and we are honored to have Aruna Miller, who is a candidate for Lieutenant Governor running with Wes Moore for Maryland. And Aruna is going to be speaking with us today about the Moore-Miller Transportation Plan. Welcome, Aruna.
Thank you so much, Robin. And thank you to everyone who's here this morning. I'm looking forward to mostly hearing from you what the solutions that we can work together on to improve people's lives in Baltimore region. Should I go ahead and get started?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I believe Tom is going to be working on the slides. And I will be, mostly going through what I need to say. So first off, I want to say that it's a pleasure to be here once again. And, just a little bit about who I am. For 25 years, I have worked collaboratively and supervise and manage large multidisciplinary teams and multimodal, multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects from concept to execution, where I worked at Montgomery County DOT as a transportation engineer and a planner. So I understand the principles, the practices of traffic, transit, pedestrian, bicycle, and roadway planning, as well as traffic forecasting and modeling. So I served as a manager for sidewalks and bikeways program. And I also was a transportation planning manager for overseeing large capital projects. So that's a little bit about my, professional background. So I've seen from ground level on what it takes to plan and implement a project. And that perspective will continue to guide me if Wes Moore and I are lucky enough to be elected as your next governor and lieutenant governor. Now, I also have had the great privilege and honor as serving as a Maryland state legislator. And this, gave me a really holistic awareness of big picture policy issues, the ability to synthesize data, to make decisions, enact public policy, and most importantly, build strategic alliances and coalitions. And it gave me the opportunity to listen to residents of the district I served, District 15, who shared their stories and the challenges that they were facing. So over the years, we worked together to develop practical solutions to the challenges that they were facing. In fact, I would even go as far as saying that almost 80% of legislation that I proposed while being in the Maryland General Assembly came directly from my constituents. Now, Wes, most of you may know or may not know, but I'll just let you know a little bit about him. Wes is a third-generation Marylander. He's a Rhodes Scholar, a White House Fellow who graduated directly from your city at Johns Hopkins University. And he's a former CEO of one of the nation's largest poverty-fighting organizations. And he's a combat veteran who knows the power of promising to leave no one behind. Look, together we have dedicated our lives to building more equitable communities. And this is why Wes Moore and I are running to be the next governor and lieutenant governor, to fight for those who've been left behind, to improve lives through social, racial, environmental, transportation, reproductive, healthcare, and economic justice. And the reason why I'm here this morning, as I said earlier, isn't so much to talk about Wes and me and our transportation plans, but really to listen to you. You all are the boots on the ground. You've been up close and personal to the daily challenges folks are facing in the Baltimore region, whether it's because you serve as a transit advocate or an employee of the MTA or other organization, or as business leaders, or you have the desire to see your community succeed and thrive. And so Wes and I firmly believe that those closest to the challenge are closest to the solution. So I'm happy to get into my our PowerPoint at this moment. So next slide, please. Okay, so our transportation plan, our plan ahead is a platform that's been guided by equity. We are committed to empowering all families in our state to live a dignified and fulfilling life and to have access to sustainable economic opportunities. Transit and transportation are key to ensuring Marylanders can better themselves and their families. And you all know that I think it was the 2015 Harvard University study that found that access to transit was the largest factor in determining if an individual or family can escape poverty. Yeah, given 1/3 of Baltimore residents lack access to personal vehicle, it is it's time the region and its residents are, enabled to succeed by making sure that we really have robust transit system out here. So these are some of the plans we have. Not only does it provide equity, it's going to create economic opportunity. It will protect the environment and, of course, improve public safety, provide congestion relief, and continue to improve on our system preservation. Slide 3. So we talked a little bit about, equity, and, I don't want to get into too much of, reading off the slides here, but earlier, Robin, if you remember, we did a roundtable discussion. You, Jimmy, and many others participated, and we so much appreciate what you had to say. And Jimmy, I remember the story that you shared was so profound to me because you talked about how you owned a restaurant and the employees that were working there had to use public transit in order to come to, serve as cooks or waitresses or waiters. And because the transit that they were using was so unreliable that they didn't make it to work on time. And as a result of that, you ended up having to terminate their employment, not because of any fault of those individuals, but because transit wasn't available to be able and dependable and reliable to bring them to their job. And that is so, so unfortunate. And this is where public transit plays such a huge equity issue. Not only that, I served some time volunteering for an organization called Justice Jobs. And Justice Jobs was about helping returning citizens to be able to earn employment, help them to prepare, to interview, to look for jobs, and to be able to get to their jobs. And the executive director there told me as well, the biggest barrier to employment for them was reliable, dependable transit. Because many times returning citizens face a situation where they're probably getting entry-level jobs, and these jobs oftentimes don't fit into the time frame of transit hours. And as a result of that, they couldn't get to their jobs. Furthermore, even if they did fit into the hours where transit was available, much like your employees, Jimmy, it wasn't dependable or reliable. So we need to make sure that we make transit the biggest part of the lens that we're looking through. This is an equity issue. So thank you. Next slide. So as we know, there's a lot of challenges ahead related to that. And, you can read some of this. Part of it is also the politically motivated transportation decisions. I know this because I served in the General Assembly, and yes, a lot of decisions are made politically, and it shouldn't be that way because that's not what transportation is about. It really is an equity issue, and we need to address this and really look at it through that lens and not through a partisan lens. It's about serving people. It's about making sure people get to their jobs on time, making sure our kids get to school on time, making sure the elderly have access and they can get to grocery stores and food deserts, if they're living in food deserts, anybody for that matter, or getting to the hospital on time, getting medications. So it's a huge, huge issue. Next slide. So the best part about this is we got a lot of solutions out there, right? And most of which I'd like to hear from you later on, what your ideas of the solutions are. But some of the ones that we in the Moore-Miller administration propose is, exploring microtransit options and discounted transit fare programs. For the economically disadvantaged. And it's not just in Baltimore City. When Wes and I, as we traveled through the entire state of Maryland, rural Marylanders face the same exact issues as those that are faced in urban areas. They also have a problem with transit. In fact, they tend to be even, just as much relying on transit and public transportation because of the sheer, distance between where they have to travel. So microtransit, we think, would be a great way to approach this. And we also say that, look, we got a whole bunch of money coming in from the federal government on infrastructure funding. And we want to make sure that our transit system is reliable and gets the funding that they need to be able to, really ramp up what we need to do to take advantage and leverage this funding. And, we want to make sure that we consider the impact of our transportation decisions on local communities. Look, no project can be built without having all the stakeholders at the table. I can tell you, as being a manager of the sidewalks and bikeways program, when I first joined, my manager told me, he's like, hey, Aruna, this is, you're going to love this program. Everybody loves a bikeway and sidewalk. Well, you know what? I got in there. Come to find out, everybody does not love a sidewalk and bikeway. People feel very, very committed and intimate to the property that's in front of their home. You touch a blade of grass, even if it is to build a sidewalk, let me tell you, it creates a whole bunch of emotions, and you get a lot of pushback even on the simplest of projects like that. So I know that we need to be able to hear the community, to have them there, to listen to them. And, in the end, it may take a little bit longer to come up with a solution, but the solutions tend to be much better because, again, those closest to the challenge are closest to the solution. And we think that we can have a much better solutions out there when we listen to the people. So we definitely want to make sure that we have all the stakeholders at the table as we move forward. Next slide. Creating economic opportunity, right? We know that one of the biggest motivators of transportation is to be able to attract businesses, so, to help small businesses, to attract larger businesses to our area. I served on the business climate work group when I was in the General Assembly, and we met with business leaders all over the state, small, large, medium, and we asked them, look, what is some of the reasons why you would expand your current business in our state or move a business from another state to Maryland? And some of the reasons they cited was making sure that we have good schools in the area because their employees want to send their kids to good schools. And the schools also create a pipeline of workers. They also look to see, what the transportation access that is going to be available for their employees, not just highways, but also transit, also bikeways, also sidewalks, the whole comprehensive, transit-oriented development. They look to see that as well. And they also look to see taxes and the regulatory process. And so at the time, we had just proposed the gas tax, where we were going to get a whole influx of funding to be able to provide, the monies needed to build transportation infrastructure projects. And we knew at the time we also had great public school system. And of course, we now have to work on with the blueprint to make sure it is great in every area in Maryland and not just in the high income areas. And quality of life issues are great here in Maryland, and we need to further improve it. But bottom line is, in the end, when we asked them, they said transportation was one of the biggest issues. And again, I had a business owner here in Montgomery County where I live that actually moved his business 6 miles down the road, a business of over 300 employees. You could imagine, just moving a business, the whole sheer logistics and time and money that's involved in moving them. But he moved it. You know why? Because he said he could not hire employees unless they, because they were demanding that there be public transit close by. This is the 21st century employees that are out there. They don't want to get in a car and drive in, single occupancy vehicles so much as being able to take advantage of public transit where they can continue to work, look at their smartphone, and do the things that they would like to do to be more productive with their time. So I think it's going to play a huge role in our economy and making sure that when you have a public transit line, immediately you'll have economic development right around, the edges of it. And that's what we want to make sure that we do with this. Next slide. And then, of course, we have, challenges here, right? Again, the lack of transit-oriented communities. And we need to strengthen BWI Airport, ensuring that people from surrounding communities can commute to the airport and take advantage of the airport's growth. And we want to position the airport and the Port of Baltimore as a key transit hubs for good jobs. Goods and jobs. Next slide. Sorry about that. And creating economic opportunity and solutions, and it's investing in commuter rail solutions and driving mixed use and walkable and bikeable communities. Look, I know in the Baltimore region you got a lot of different transit lines, but are they all talking to each other, right? We got to make sure that it's done in unison, that it's all working together. And you can tell me more about it, whether you believe that that is exactly what's happening or not in your region. And we also know that, here that we also have a lot of, operator shortage, right? The on-time performance and reliability of current light rail and the Baltimore Link bus services has been pretty poor in recent months. And MTA, I believe, has cited an operator shortage to impact in recent reliability and performance. And so I can tell you our first priority for transit must be to ensure reliability and performance of existing services in Baltimore so that Baltimoreans can rely on it and get to work, to school, to places of worship, to restaurants such as Jimmy's, and so much more. So we have to make sure that the workforce development and that we have a workforce development and that adequate funding would be at the top for us to make sure that we provide these as priorities. Look, it's not just in the transportation sector. I know that the current administration has cut jobs everywhere throughout the whole, departments, whether it's in environment, in transportation, in human resources, and this is not good. I guess the current administration feels that this is a job savings, when in fact, I mean, not job savings, cost savings, when in fact, we will all pay for it one way or another. If you do not adequately staff our departments, then citizens of our state are not getting the services that they deserve, that they are paying for through their tax dollars. Therefore, one of our first priorities to make sure that we evaluate these departments, make sure we fully staff them, to the best of our abilities, so the citizens get the services that they deserve. Next slide. So, let's see. Again, you can all read this, but, we can take advantage of the $25 billion in infrastructure funding to be able to help our airports and air service expansion. And yeah, here we go. I'll just let you all read this. Okay. Because look, as an engineer, I love PowerPoint, Robin, but as an engineer, I also know that, man, there's nothing worse than, seeing those bullets on the page and the person just reading them verbatim, right? So I'll try to resist from doing that.
Well, thank you so much. That's fine. We will also be sharing your presentation at the conclusion of the meeting. So if people don't have a chance at this moment, they certainly will be able to go back and review.
Okay, great. Next slide. And protecting the environment, right? We have to work together, oh my God, comprehensively about combating climate change. It is, we have to do this with a great sense of urgency. So and the best part of in transportation is there's so many solutions in which we can help to reduce our carbon footprint. And as you can see, here are some bullet points right here. Next slide. So here we go. Maryland's transportation sector is a major contributor to emissions and climate change, producing over 30% of our total emissions. And over 600 Marylanders die each year from the 15 dangerous effects of vehicle emissions. And you can see the pie chart here that describes the various different ways Maryland energy consumption by end use sector. Next slide. So the solutions, again, include making sure that we transition the state fleet of vehicles to EVs by 2030. Now, that seems like a simple solution. We can do this, but, we also have to think about what do we do with the existing vehicles that we have? Where do they go? And so, as much as solutions may seem like, they're readily there, there's also consequences to that, right? So we need to talk about what do we do with our existing fleet, where do they go, and so forth. So, and there's a whole bunch of other bullets we've identified there for your reading pleasure later on. Next slide. And the solutions also include HOV electric lanes in appropriate new highway construction projects, changing HOV lanes to HOV electric lanes, so forth. And I love creating walkable micro neighborhoods to reduce congestion and provide people with access to services and amenities. Next slide. So improving safety, congestion, and system preservation, right? This is something, especially system preservation is not something that's really all that sexy to talk about, but let me tell you, it plays a huge role in the safety and in relieving congestion relief, making sure our roadways are kept, up to date, making sure our bridges are fixed when necessary, we have to be able to concentrate on all of these factors. Next slide. And, sadly, we continue to have fatalities every year, along our roadways. And we just need to make sure that our roadways, our neighborhoods are safe for those that are traveling. and, reduce the unpleasant, harmful, ways of getting to work. I know it's soul crushing for people to be sitting in traffic congestion for hours on our roadways, or, waiting for so long to pick up the bus in order to get there. In fact, I think if I recall, Wes actually did an experiment where he, used one of the transit buses in Durham neighborhood, I believe it is, and it's only I believe, 15-mile commute. And it took him an hour and 20 minutes, I believe, in order to use the different buses just to get to where he needed to go to. So yeah, we got to make a lot of improvements in these areas. Next slide. And again, it comes with, solutions, and this is providing training and the resources needed to help our local communities to implement, Vision Zero. I know here in Montgomery County, we're doing that quite a bit. And I'm sure you all are doing this as well in Baltimore City and throughout, hopefully, the entire state. Next slide. And again, a little bit more solutions to improving safety and congestion. Again, I talked a little bit earlier about attracting to retain remote workers, by creating a statewide entity to provide technical assistance and best practices. Look, I think there's been a lot of unfortunate, horrible things that happen as a result of COVID. People lost their lives, people lost their jobs. Our children weren't able to get to school and learn. There was a lot of negative things that happened, no doubt. But there was also some good things that resulted from it. And one of them, was this, sheer opportunity to work remotely in employment centers that allow you to do it. And that goes a long ways, as I see, as a low-lying fruit to be able to address transit congestion on our highways and our roadways. If we can further encourage those employers who can allow their employees to work remotely, to encourage that more, because when they are off the roadways, it makes it easier, for others to be able to commute. It's better for the environment. It's better for the employees from a quality of life issue. So I would like to continue to work on this initiative. When I first was part of, when I got elected to the General Assembly, that was one of the bills that I had proposed, to give employers a tax incentive to be able to allow employees to work from home. It's like, it didn't make sense to me. Here we have the technology to do it, and yet few employers were taking advantage of that. And I think COVID, pretty much forced us to do that. And we learned that, hey, it can work. Now, I'm not saying it works for everybody. Look, a restaurant like Jimmy's and others, it doesn't work to have remote employees, right? You got to have them physically there. But anyway, next slide. All right. I'm glad, and I'm sure you all are glad, that me talking on and on is about to end. And now what I'm really excited about is hearing your questions, your burning issues, and the solutions that you all have to make our state a better place for all, and specifically those that are living in the Baltimore City area. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to share some of our thoughts. And as I said, I'm looking forward to hearing from you now.
Aruna, thank you so much on behalf of Transit Choices and all of our meeting attendees.
Sure.
Your very thoughtful and insightful presentation gives a lot of food for thought about a very, very important, if not one of the most important factors, to our, vitality, to our overall success as a city and a region with respect to public transportation. And we also greatly appreciate, we know you're a very, very busy woman, sharing part of your day with us. So for that, we remain grateful. With that said, I would like to open the floor to questions, comments, I'm sure that we're going to have a lot of conversation. So what I'd like to do is, if you would like to ask Aruna a question, you may raise your hand. I will do my very best. We've got, I think, another half hour, which is great to be able to address you. If not, you can certainly place a comment or provide feedback in the chat. Tom, I'd like to ask you if you would to kindly remove the presentation. Great. So in no particular order, let's start with Lindsay.
Yes, and thank you so much for your excellent presentation, Ms. Miller, and really looking forward to working with you. So I know that in your presentation, you mentioned part of the environmental initiatives is transitioning the state fleet, which I think is really important. But I also wanted to mention that trucks, buses, delivery vans, and other large vehicles make up the second largest source of transportation pollution and 50% of particulate matter pollution from the entire transportation sector. Recently, multiple states, including Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey, California, Washington, Oregon, have moved forward with a regulation known as the Advanced Clean Truck Rule, which would opt into California standards requiring large vehicle manufacturers to sell an increasing percentage of those large trucks and vehicles into the state. So I wanted to see if elected, if your administration would follow those states and adopt this standard for clean trucks.
Well, that's a great idea, Lindsay, and I would like to learn more about it. And look, if other states have already, started implementing this, that makes it so much easier for us to be able to do that as well, right? Because we can learn from the best management practices that they've already incorporated, and maybe even improve it further by being able to see what worked for them, what didn't work for them. So I would love to be able to consider that. And if you could, send me more information on this, I think Tom will put my contact information in the chat box, which, by the way, I want you all to know that Wes and I definitely want to make sure that we are accessible to all of you at any time, any day. So Tom will be putting my personal email address. And to all of you, I'm happy to share with you my personal cell number as well. So feel free to reach out to me at any time. My cell number is 240-994-9042.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Barbara?
Thank you. So I know that Wes Moore has criticized Governor Hogan's plan to add toll lanes to I-495 and I-270. And this is of interest across the state because taxpayers could end up across the state subsidizing the private contractor, the private operator for these toll lanes for 50 years. And so while I'm pleased to hear him say that he does not support Governor Hogan's plan, he hasn't stated explicitly that he's opposed to private toll lanes for I-495 and I-270. And I wonder if you could tell us more about his position specifically on that piece of the plan.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Barbara. So I'll tell you, this is where we stand right now. Most of you all know that the project has been, gotten their approval from the Federal Highway Administration. So the next step for the project, the big milestone, is to be able to get the vote on the Board of Public Works, which of course, many of you know, includes the treasurer, the comptroller, and the governor, who get to decide the ultimate fate of this project. But before that can happen, I believe Transurban just hired a construction contractor for this project. And I think it's called, what is it, Tudor Perini or something? I don't know, some recent contractor that, got it. So, but in order for BPW to vote on this project, there's some other steps that need to take place. And I don't want to get into all that, but anyway, overall, Wes and I believe that it is not the current comptroller and the current governor that should decide the fate of a project that needs to be implemented in the future, right? We really believe it should be that of the next administration to do so. So where do Wes and I stand on this project? We believe that the current P3 project for I-270 and 495 has a lot of flaws to it. Number one, the procurement process is deeply flawed, right? Any large-scale procurement contracts is something that we believe needs to be fiscally responsible, that looks out for the workers, and most importantly, is in the best interest of Marylanders. When we have 50-year contracts that we're giving to a private entity, I mean, that's a long contract, folks. My mortgage isn't even that long, okay? So I'm not sure why we're giving 50 years to a private entity. Now, the other part of that is when they came up with this plan, look, I live in that region and I represented the folks of that region in the Up County, Montgomery County area, and I've seen them sit in traffic, the commuters. I know how soul crushing it is. But at the same time, I know that the current administration didn't work with our community to understand what our issues are. Do we have other solutions that could be better, that would have a less of a carbon footprint on the project? And so that's a major, I believe, a fault in any type of capital improvement project. As I said, even something as simple as a sidewalk, we would pull in the community to hear their thoughts. And something as one of the biggest P3 projects in the nation, I mean, that's what Governor Hogan has cited, that this, P3, he boasted it as being one of the biggest. And so, for something like that, you need to have the local elected leaders, the local community at the table to help make the decisions as you move forward. And I don't think they were very transparent about that. Number three, any capital improvement project such as this has to be looking at it through the lens of a comprehensive improvement, which means that you have to have transit feature on there. So such as, bus rapid transit, maybe even a light rail, maybe even buses on shoulder. All these options weren't really, weighed in, and not to mention the huge environmental impact that this is going to have to add an additional 2, lanes, and not to mention the fact they're hot lanes, right? So here we are paying for these lanes, and it's still not clear what the round trip total of that is, whether it's in the $40 to $60 range in order to use these lanes. I don't think that's serving in the best interest of Marylanders. So Wes and I are opposed to the project as currently presented. We are opposed to the hot lanes on I-270 and 495. We do want to see the improvements along American Legion Bridge. We do think that's absolutely necessary. But along I-270, we are not in support of this. And from an equity standpoint as well. When you don't have transit features on there and you're spending this kind of money, I mean, who are you helping other than just the haves? You're not helping the have-nots. And I know as a policymaker and as a transportation engineer that anything that you do has to be able to address comprehensively all the residents of the state of Maryland. So that's where we stand right now. I don't know, Barbara, if I've been able to clearly answer your question. We do not support the hot lanes along I-270. Look, can hot lanes work in other regions of the state? Yeah, that should be considered elsewhere if other projects come up. But along I-270, we're not proponents of this. We think there's a whole bunch of other solutions out there, and some of which the communities have already shared with us, from reversible lanes, to being able to, as I said, having bus rapid transit, making improvements to other roadways that are adjacent to the project. And I've worked on some of those roadway projects that have been in our master plans for years and years and years. And all the development around the area has been, completed, with the exception of completing this roadway or infrastructure improvement. That's a problem, because you should not be allowed to allow development to take place unless the infrastructure first is in place. So I think there's lots of solutions out there. But this particular one, I really hope that, the Board of Public Works will delay this vote till the new administration comes in.
Brian?
Thanks, Robin. Ms. Miller, when you were delegate, the General Assembly passed a law that I think speaks to, you talked about your concern about the politics in transportation decisions. I think it's always going to be political, but there are steps that we can take to make it more transparent and more accountable to goals. And there was a law called the Maryland Open Transportation Investment Decisions Act. Thank you for your support when you were in the General Assembly. It passed in 2016. I think it's fair to say Governor Hogan hated it. He called it the roadkill bill and made it his #1 legislative priority to repeal it.
Yeah.
And it got watered down a little bit, but it did stay in the law, and it's now Chapter 30. So, we look across the Potomac at our neighbors in Virginia. They have Smart Scale, which is a policy that holds transportation funding decisions accountable to goals and creates a lot of transparency. So anyone can look and see which projects were approved for funding and how they scored. Counties or cities that don't get funding for a project they want can get feedback on why not, and understand because it didn't support equity goals or it didn't support climate goals, and they can rework their project and resubmit, and many do, and come back the next year and get funded. So we have a law like that on the books, and MDOT has not made a sincere effort to implement it, but the next administration could. And so I'm curious, is the Moore-Miller administration looking at that law? And do you have plans to direct your MDOT, if in office, to do a better job of implementing it than the current administration has?
Brian, first off, thank you for your leadership on this. I remember, following the General Assembly, you're an advocate for this, and you always come in and fight the good fight for more transit options. So thank you for what you do each and every day. Yes, I was a co-sponsor on that bill. In fact, it came right out of Appropriations Committee. And we worked on it through Appropriations Committee. And look, MDOT, again, is doing whatever the administration is telling them to do. I think that if we are lucky in a Moore-Miller administration, we definitely want to revisit this. We definitely want to make sure that we work to really rate projects on, in a measured way about their ability to improve, their communities, and it shouldn't be political. Look, even as Wes and I go, throughout the state, people will often say, hey, why are you going over to, the Eastern Shore or Western Maryland? There's not a lot of Democrats out there. And you know what we say? Yeah, but there's a lot of Marylanders out there. And that's how we're going to approach transportation too, that every Marylander deserves to have safe access to transportation. And that should be, as you said, the #1 priority. Through an equity lens, we need to look at it. So I can't wait to get there. I can't wait to be able to roll up my sleeves and to make sure that this becomes implemented. And look, in the beginning, it's going to be a little rough, right? Because anytime you're implementing new ideas, you'll have, some folks that'll huff and puff and say, oh, this is more work that we got to do than already that we're doing. But again, I think it's important to do these things because we get better at our skill set. You get to hear the thoughts and you get to look at it from a different perspective. And I can tell you, Wes is coming in from that perspective. He's going to be looking at everything throughout all of the various departments and ask the hard questions. Why aren't we doing this? And why are we doing this? And if the answer is because it's always been that way, that's unacceptable. We need to understand how we can streamline our government, how we can make it better, how we can, make sure that we're able to address the needs of all Marylanders. So this particular law, I definitely want to be able to implement it. I want to give some teeth to it. And, like I said, it may cause more delays as we move forward in some projects. But again, I think if we bring people like you, Brian, to the table and to really fine tune these, bumps that we may hit along the way, we will get there and it'll be a better system as a result.
Susan?
Good morning, and thank you so much for being here to talk about your transportation plans. The superconducting magnetic levitation train system that has been proposed would have a major footprint in the area, but would serve relatively few Marylanders as far as mass transit, because it is not mass transit. We are concerned about the built environment. There's going to be a large footprint underground, naturally, but also overground with in the Greenbelt area and in many areas along the way with ventilation stations, et cetera. A lot of built environment. Just because it's underground doesn't mean nothing's built around it, obviously, right? But we are very concerned about this issue. I spoke at a recent meeting that candidate Moore had was attending, and he indicated that the project did not meet his three-pronged criteria. And I wonder if you could explain that so everybody knows that is. But also he said, if you really want to get into the transportation issues, talk to Aruna Miller, because she's my point person. So could you give more in-depth response to the view about the SC Maglev, which, as it said, environmental, and it also heavily environmental justice communities, and incredibly expensive project.
Sure.
So thank you very much.
Susan, thank you so much. And yes, look, there's all sorts, people will come up with all sorts of solutions. And I know Maglev has been one of these projects that people have been interested in for a long time. It's innovative, it's high tech, it's got its pluses. But when Wes said that he's got a three-pronged approach, my understanding of that is we're going to look at it through a equity lens. We're going to look at it through an economic lens, and we're going to look at it through an environmental lens, right? And does it meet these criterias? From an equity standpoint, I don't think so, because, as you just pointed out, it doesn't quite, it isn't really addressing the needs of those that are, disadvantaged, who don't have cars, because are they going to be able to afford to get on the maglev and use it, as needed? Now, does a maglev, is it going to create a lot of economic opportunity? I'm not really sure of that either. Look, I'm not as familiar with this project, to be honest with you, Susan, I will say that. And so I probably need to learn a lot more from you all and others about the, I know it's got a tremendous amount of impact to the adjacent communities, as do all transportation projects. And, part of it is those that are adjacent to it, again, are the ones that are going to be most impacted by it. And if we are having, issues with them being able to get on board. I mean, that's a non-starter right there. But again, I think this is a project that has been evaluated for a number of years and it really hasn't made much progress. But if it does, for whatever reason, at the federal level, I think that's where it's at right now. They have to be able to approve it to the next level. I think it's, something that we need to have a greater detail and discussion on.
The Maryland Coalition for Responsible Transit has a great deal of information, position papers, et cetera, and has done a great deal of research.
Okay.
And so we can put in the chat how you can contact, you can look
Sure.
at more information. We've done a lot of citizen and expert citizen research on it too. So thank you very
That'd be
much.
great.
Thank you.
Thank you. We look forward to seeing that.
We have time for 2 more questions. We're going to be concluding this meeting at 9:25. We want to respect Aruna's very busy schedule today. So I would like to go to Brian.
Thank you. Aruna, 2 of the transportation block grants that Maryland gets from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act would allow up to 50% of the funds, totaling about 300 million a year, to go towards transit versus highways. Would your administration commit to doing that?
Absolutely. Yes. I love it that they're looking at it through this equity lens. I think, and that's why we're getting more funding for transit. Absolutely.
Great. Thank you very much. I was hoping to hear that. I was expecting to hear that.
Alicia?
Hi there. Thank you. I'm the capital planning chief with the Baltimore City DOT, and I really enjoyed hearing about your vision. It's really great to hear that you came from a local jurisdiction managing transportation improvement projects. So you probably already know very well that local DOTs have needs that sometimes far exceed our budget, and there ends up being a long backlog of unfunded needs. And in Baltimore City, we don't have the same ability to leverage state highway funding since the state doesn't own any of our roads. We're responsible for all of them. However, we do have some large capital project needs, and sometimes they far exceed our ability to fund. And in some cases, we can't even provide the minimum required 20% match if we were to get federal funding. So how do you propose to work with local DOTs to help advance some major transportation investments? Thanks.
Sure. No, thank you for that question. Now, I know that we have the highway user revenue that is often given to local jurisdictions, but I think that's primarily like municipalities. Does Baltimore City get any money from that?
We do, and we will be getting an increase, but even with the projected increase, we will not be able to even make our 20% matches for certain large projects.
Sure. So again, I think we need to look at it through an equity lens. Clearly, there are certain jurisdictions that won't be able to get the match, as you said, whether it's rural parts of Maryland or, cities like Baltimore. Well, let me ask you this. Do you have any ideas on how Annapolis can better partner with Baltimore City from a transportation funding perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that we have been partnering with the Maryland Transit Administration on several major initiatives, and I think overall that's been going very well. However, we do have some projects that might be freight related or roadway related and less transit related. And we haven't enjoyed the luxury of working with all of MDOT's modal agencies to the same extent as we have with MDOT or with MTA.
Okay. So would you say then, you would like to see a better cooperative relationship with MTA in Baltimore City?
I think that our relationship with MTA is already a very strong relationship.
Okay.
But not with it could be strengthened with other MDOT agencies.
Okay, got it. And so since the state doesn't own any of the roadways in Baltimore City, do you all still collaborate at any level with the State Highway Administration?
Rarely, if we get a transportation alternatives grant or something like that, we will work with the state highway for those grants, but those are typically, not major infrastructure investments.
Okay. So specifically, you would like to see ways in which we can leverage or get more funding for Baltimore City transportation projects.
Right. And, we do have a good partnership with MTA on a lot of efforts to help advance transit priorities. However, we have other priorities, with, major bridges, major infrastructure, freight infrastructure. And so we are looking for additional partnership opportunities.
Okay. I think that's great. I mean, that's that should be the base for everything, right? That we are serving the folks of Baltimore City, and therefore the state should be partnering with you all and coming up with ideas and solutions to these problems. Now, from a funding perspective, as you know, when we pass the budget, much of the budget's already accounted for, right? Almost 85% of our general funds is accounted for through mandates and so forth, but there's still an opportunity for capital improvements, and let's work together on that if we can get additional funding. And maybe there's other ways we can partner with you as well, not just through funding, but being able to give you expertise and resources, as in the form of human resources, to be able to help you get projects done and implemented. Because I know oftentimes, especially when you're dealing with getting money from the federal government, you got to jump through a lot of hoops to get that funding. And I know, having worked at Montgomery County DOT, when we tried to get funding for bikeway projects or a transit project, the amount of paperwork, the amount of, as I said, hoops you had to jump through, it was almost not even worth it to get the money, because they would just delay our project by months and months, if not years, in order to implement everything that they were asking us to do. And so I think it's really important that local jurisdictions have the manpower and the expertise to help them to guide the federal funding, because a lot of times we don't have that. I mean, have you ever faced that situation?
We've been managing through it. We do receive federal funding, so we have successfully been able to manage it in the past. However, we're entering a new era with the IIJA discretionary grants, this whole new whirlwind of funding opportunities. And it's exciting because it's an opportunity to do some projects that we have been wanting to do for a long time. But as we look through what our budget is and what these total project investments are, I mean, we're talking like hundreds of millions of dollars for certain large infrastructure projects, and we just can't come up with a 20% match.
Right.
Alicia, I'm so sorry. We're going to have to stop there. What I would like to do is to ask Aruna. I will be sure there are an awful lot of really great questions and comments in the chat. And what I would like to do following this meeting is to send those to you. I certainly don't want to increase your workload, but it would be wonderful if you would be able to, to respond to, some, if not all of those questions, because I would love for them to be addressed. Absolutely. And I know that you have to run, and Jimmy Rouse is going to just speak for one moment on behalf of our meeting to wrap up. Jimmy? Okay. Jimmy? Okay, I will do that for him. I'm not sure if he's having a problem with audio. Again, we are so grateful to have you share part of your day with us. It was very exciting to hear about your vision and plans and commitment to improving public transit, really for Maryland, for the region. And we appreciate all that you or Wes are doing on that behalf. So with that said, we thank you all for joining us as well. We could not do this without you, so we greatly appreciate your participation. Look forward to upcoming meeting notices for the Transit Choices meeting, and we hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Transit Choices.